It has been said that in Twilight Struggle, you need to know the cards well in order to play well. Well, we're going to take you through every card one by one, and we're going to help you become a master at Twilight Struggle. This is Legendary Tactics. This card is a great event for the US player, especially given that it's a card where nothing is lost by playing the event. But even more importantly, it can be a deadly event for the Soviet player, and it's very important that the USSR knows how to deal with this one. Let's take a look at why such an innocuous-looking event can be so dangerous. CIA Created is a one-op early war starred US event that, if played for that event, allows the US player to look at the Soviet player's hand and then take an action as though they had played a one-up card. This can be a very dangerous card for the Soviet player, though that might not be as obvious to someone newer to the game. The risky part is the second half of the event, which allows the US an operations point even if the Soviet player played the card and triggered the event. So if DEFCON is at 2, a coup in a battleground state, whether it succeeds or not, will lower DEFCON to 1, which will lose the Soviet player the game. This is something that might seem confusing to newer players because even though the US player did the coup to lower DEFCON, it happened on a card play by the Soviet. Therefore, in game terms, it is considered to be the Soviet player's action that lowered the DEFCON to a game-ending 1. So how does the Soviet player deal with this? Well, because it is a one-op card, it can be difficult to send to space, unless Brezhnev Doctrine has been played. The best option is to play it where there are no battleground states available to coup during the early war. At the beginning of the game, the only 2 battleground states that have any influence in them outside of Europe, Middle East, and Asia are in South Africa and Panama, and in both cases the influence there is American. If the Soviet player can play the card either when DEFCON is higher than 2, or, if DEFCON is at 2, when there are no available battleground states for the US to target, the effect of this card can be sizably mitigated. Obviously, it's better to play this later on in the turn when you have less cards to reveal to your opponent, but this has to be balanced with the risk that CIA Created can just plain ruin your game and your day. Fidel is one of the main cards you need to worry about here. If the US player chooses to play this event before CIA Created is triggered, that would give the US a perfect target for a battleground coup that could win them the game. If you draw this and you do have influence outside of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, then you have to do a lot of mitigation. If you want to choose the safe option, you can play it in your first action round, giving up the first battleground coup opportunity and having to show the American player your whole hand. Otherwise, if you have the American event nuclear subs, CIA Created won't lose you the game for that turn. Just save both cards for late in the turn to minimize the effects of both. UN intervention will also work, but hopefully you don't need the space in your hand to hold any other US events over to next turn, as that will be out the window. Or you can just hold it from turn to turn until you see a good opportunity to get rid of it. Realistically though, it might just be best to take your lumps and play it on the first action round of a turn. It's not great for you, but it's a small price to pay to stay in the game. As the US player, this should almost always be played for ops before the turn 7 reshuffle. You want to make sure that the Soviet player has a chance of picking it up and having to deal with it. After turn 7 though, they're not going to draw it again, so you might as well use the event as you will still get the operations point and get to see the Soviet hand into the bargain. It makes for a decent headline at that stage, although there may be plenty of better ones in your hand at that point. One might consider headlining it in turn 1 with the justification that they can get the jump on the Soviet player's goals for that very important turn by viewing the cards in hand and can place an influence in Afghanistan or Pakistan to offset the common and important Soviet opening, the Iran coup. Alternatively, one could use the operations point in a small battleground state coup to lower the DEFCON to 4, which protects Italy. It's interesting, and some people swear by it, but it is ultimately more worthwhile as a potential DEFCON suicide card down the road. Between the turn 3 and turn 7 reshuffles, you could use this as a headline, especially if you need to play an op somewhere to shore up an important area or to drop DEFCON ahead of the first Soviet action round. I would still recommend that you lean towards leaving it in the deck, but circumstances may demand flexibility on your part. Also, you have to consider that the Soviets may then only draw this card back up between turns 7 and 10, and it may not be quite as impactful at that point. And don't forget that when the mid-war begins, the US gets a bunch of cards added like grain sales to Soviets, Nixon plays a China card, Ussuri River skirmish, and ones from the early war like 5-year plan that reduce Soviet hand size and limit his ability to mitigate CIA created. If you can turn any of these into a combo, it could guarantee you will win, as the Soviets will not be able to avoid playing it and committing DEFCON suicide. Interestingly, the fact that this card exists makes playing the Fidel card and triggering that event in turn 1 or 2 a little more tolerable, as it means that CIA created becomes potentially deadly. If you haven't seen it by the time the cards have been dealt for turn 3, you know that the USSR has it, and you might even consider headlining Fidel in that case, to avoid him dumping CIA in his first action round, and hopefully leaving him with quite a massive quandary. In summary, the Soviet player needs to get this card out of the deck as safely and as soon as possible, even if the cost is letting the US see their entire hand. Sometimes it's either that or losing the game. And the US player has some flexibility with this one, although generally I would recommend using it for ops until at least turn 7, after which you should use the event 100% of the time. This has been our analysis of the CIA created card in Twilight Struggle. Thank you so much for watching. If you got some value from this, please like, please subscribe, and please tune in next time. I'm NATO with Legendary Tactics.